Hey, I'm Randy, and you're watching The Cheap Audio Man. Here at The Cheap Audio Man, we talk about high-value hi-fi home theater and headphone equipment. Your hi-fi is filthy. Oh my. Sit down, grab a cup of coffee, clean up your hi-fi. Listen, there's nothing to be ashamed of. This happens to a lot of people. Happens to me. Happens to me a lot. Hundreds of people have found relief from this horrible malady that we all face. Cable management. That's right. The back of your stereo probably looks like a rat's nest. It probably looks like a bunch of blindfolded drunken sailors just tried to tie the boat off to the chocks. Like a semi trailer full of garden hoses got T-boned on I-95, and then a bunch of people ran over it. That's probably what the back of your stereo looks like. But we can fix it. The more components you get, if you have like a 9-channel home theater, you have 9 pair of speaker cables coming in. Let's say you have a DAC, you have a CD player, you have a turntable, you have all these power cords, all these RCAs. Heck, I put up a headphone DAC amp rig, in my living room. I had 3 power cords because I had a streamer, I had my DAC, and then I had my headphone amp. And it looked like garbage. I had 3 components. I had to get a power strip, the whole thing. It doesn't look good. And most of us, once you start peering behind the curtain, looks horrible. And it's borderline dangerous. If you ever try to move something, you could pull a bunch of stuff off, or you could burn your house down. Maybe that's going to an extreme, but if we tidy things up, if we organize stuff, it's safer, it looks better, and it's easier to switch out components. And you could do it all for the low price of 99 cents. Now there's a bunch of other products out there that you can use, and I would recommend those. But to get you started, about $1 at a grocery store, Home Depot. Probably have a bunch of these laying around in the garage somewhere. First step, unplug it all. Unplug everything. Power, RCAs, everything. Turntable grounding things, wires. Unplug it all. Get things into position where you want them to be, and then we're going to start replugging things in one at a time. And if you have one of these, Taylor's tape, we can start measuring. But that comes later, because first we just have to assess the situation. Take inventory of our cable problem. I actually find great joy and relaxation in reorganizing my cables, because I look back, it's kind of like vacuuming. I don't know what it is. Look at the floor, it's dirty, I vacuum, and then I just feel accomplished. Same thing, except multiply that by 1,000. When it comes to my cable management, I obviously change a lot of components in and out. Usually pretty bad back there. But when and it doesn't take a long time, but when I take 10, 20 minutes to get back there, take out all the power cords I don't need, get things nice and tidy, it just makes me feel better. A lot of fun, relaxing. Zen and the art of cable management. I start with the power cables. And I actually have, and I'll show you some pictures, I actually have a power strip on some industrial Velcro stuck to one of the lower shelves in my rack. You can get that stuff at Walmart, you can get it wherever. It's real nice and thick, probably 2 inches thick, very strong adhesive. So what I do is I put a nicer power strip down there so that I don't have to run everything out. So a lot of the terminations, or a lot of things, are getting plugged in right in the back of the rack itself. You don't need a special rack for that. You need a power strip. And spend $5 on an industrial strength Velcro. Then I run that power strip into a Furman power conditioner. Oh my goodness, a power conditioner. Yeah, but it's like $60. Actually, they've gone up. I think they're more like $100 now. They use it in pro audio. Fundamentally, is just a long power strip itself, and supposedly there's some power filtering in there. I don't know if it makes a huge difference sonically, but I'll take the insurance for $60. Probably 80 or 90 now. I've got 2 of them though. They work really well, and it has a little relay on their trips. Some of my electrical engineering buddies though say that that's not going to matter. That's not going to protect you against 1.21 gigawatts of electricity coming through your house. There's another prevailing thought process about power and then like RCAs or signal. In the car world, they always say run your power cables on one side of the car and then run your RCAs on the other. And if they have to get close, cross them at 90 degrees. Whether or not that matters in home audio, I still kind of do the same thing. So I'll separate my power cables on one side of the rack and my signal cables on the other side of my rack. If you have any input about this, and if you're an electrical engineer, please let us know in the comments. Make sure, though, that you say, I'm an like the first sentence in your comment should say, I'm an electrical engineer, and then do the comment. I don't ever see that in the comments. So I start with my power cables, and then I plug in the RCA cables, and then I plug in digital cables and whatever. If I'm plugging in a turntable, I'll plug in the ground cable too with the turntable. Then what I do is don't weave them in and out. So everything should kind of lay flat on top of each other. If you have to do something, you can run underneath, but don't weave in and out, because that's the problem I get into is I just start plugging stuff in and then it just becomes a ball of tangled up electrical cord. You ever see Christmas Vacation, Chevy Chase? He's putting up the lights, and he and Rusty are getting ready to put up the lights, and he just pulls out this ball of completely tangled Christmas lights, and he just hands it to Rusty. He said, I need to untangle that, Rusty. So I start plugging things in one at a time. Don't overlap them. And if you just do this, generally you can clean things up pretty well. But I like to take things a step further. For me, sometimes I label stuff, and you don't need a fancy label maker. You can get some masking tape and a Sharpie, wrap it around the cable and say digital RCA or RCA to amp. USB, obviously you're going to know what a USB looks like. Power for amp, power cable for amp. Because another cool thing about this is when you get things somewhat tidy, what you can do then, take your old Taylor's measuring tape, when you get things kind of pinned down, tacked down if you will, then you can take one of these. I feel like a magician. Take one of these and then you can measure exactly how long of a cable you need. Because another key thing to really tidy cable management is shorter cables. Cables that are only long enough to get the job done. But first you have to kind of tack things down and know where you want it to be before you start ordering a bunch of cables. Fundamentally, what we're doing here is we're making a wiring harness. And if you've ever seen a wiring harness in a car or a helicopter, F-35, you'll notice that it's a long, thick thing of cables, and then they branch off. And there are little branches of cables here and there. That's kind of what we want to get to, and I do that for both the power side, so I'll have one wiring harness for my power side, and then one wiring harness for my RCA signal XLR side. Now that we have all the power lines, cables, cords connected to our components, then I start grouping them together with enough relief so that it's not super tight. So a little bit of relief, and then I start to group them together. And then about every 6 inches or so, I'll take my electrical tape and I'll do one little loop. Now, key thing for electrical tape, really any tape, learned this in the Navy the hard way. It's called a buddy tab, okay? When you're doing tape for your cables, just fold it over on top. Boop. All right, that's a really poor job. That's a buddy tab, okay? Because you're your own buddy. Inevitably, you're going to have to change things out eventually. If you have the buddy tab, so what you do is you take the buddy tab, pull your cable off, and you would start with the non-buddy tab end first, and then, probably the wrong finger to do that with, and then wrap it around so the buddy tab is the last thing to go down. Now, when you need to untape this thing, you got your buddy tab right here, and then you just go, and then you're done. If you don't have a buddy tab, it can be frustrating and inconvenient. Use a buddy tab because you're your own buddy. So tape these down about every 6 inches or so. Basically what we're trying to do is keep the wires together. If they start to bunch up, just pull it down, and then where it wants to bunch, because wires, want to do their own thing, where it wants to bunch, pull it and then tape it right there. and then tape it. You can also do this with zip ties. I like to do it with electrical tape because it's not as permanent as zip ties. Kind of do a few phases. One phase is going to be electrical tape. The next phase can be zip ties. You can also get Velcro things. I have a bunch of those lying around too. You can get different colored Velcro, so you can say, okay, well, red is my RCAs or RCA to my DAC, whatever it is. So a variety of ways to do it. But zip ties and electrical tape are probably the cheapest way to do it, and you can get those anywhere. So you don't have to worry about getting these fancy Velcro different colored, but you can still get those at like Walmart in the electronics section. Now I like to hide things vertically and horizontally. If you've been watching my channel for any period of time, you know what's behind me is not what I used to have. I used to have a cinder block stereo rack that I made. I did a little how-to video on that. For $100, I built something that wasn't very good and scratched up my components. For a little bit more, you can get a purpose-built stereo rack. The ones I have behind me are, let's see if I can zoom this in. This is the is that annoying? Yeah, I bet it is. This is the Pangea Vulcan 5-shelf rack. This one's in black, kind of a rough matte black. This one is, I would call like a wood espresso. I think this is MDF, so this is just painted MDF. So the way this thing goes together is basically a bunch of, well, not a bunch, 4 vertical metal, whoopsie daisies, medical columns. Vertical metal columns, Randy. Each one has threads on the top and the bottom, and then another threaded insert goes on top. It's just a post, right? Threads in. I didn't even need any tools to do this. And me and my daughter did it. So anyway, you build the bottom. It has spiked feet, so if you want to have spiked feet on it, you can. It also comes with little discs. So I have wood floor in here, and I actually didn't use the disc because I move things out so often. I just have some vinyl stuff on the bottom so that it slides in and out. They just screw together, and they are very sturdy. I had them put together probably, it took me longer to unbox them than it, well, maybe not. Probably about the same time to unbox and to build it. 20 minutes, I think, after I got it out of the box. Packed very well. They're pretty big. Let's see how. So they curve kind of at the front here. About 19 inches deep. 19 or 20 inches deep. Deepest part here. About 23 inches wide. Which is good because I have tried to buy regular furniture that accommodates stereo equipment and generally does not do a very good job. So plenty wide, plenty deep. I had built my cinder block thing, hoping that I planned on it fitting 2 components side by side. Well, I screwed it up, so it didn't fit 2 components. But having 2 of these side by side, not only does it look pretty good, but it is very useful for my purposes. The 4-shelf rack goes for $199. 5-shelf rack goes for $250, and I think you can add additional shelves. So I think you can start off with the 4-shelf rack and add another one. The only other racks that I know of that are in a similar price category, I think are from Monoprice. And I don't have their full rack, but I do have some Monoprice shelves that very similar design. They're not as nice though. I don't know what about it. It just feels like a step lower in quality. This is nothing that is going to knock your socks off as far as like beautifully engineered and made. It's simple, it's solid, it works, and it's somewhat affordable. I have a VTI cabinet back there made out of metal and stuff. I spent hundreds. I think I got it used too. It was like $500, and it has glass shelves and stuff. I guess it looks okay, but I don't even use it. I just have stuff stacked on it because these are easier to use, and my cinder block shelf was easier to use. The cool thing about these though is that you can do a couple of things. First, you have a bunch of vertical surfaces. So you can use the rear vertical column to hide most of your cables. Secondly, you can hide stuff horizontally here. If you buy these, it's also very simple. You got to be committed at this point. Drill some holes in the back, large enough to accommodate some zip ties. And then you can use that, drill a hole maybe every 4 or 6 inches or something. And then you put some zip ties in there and then you can hide the cables horizontally as well. The other thing you can do, again, just use some good old-fashioned electrical tape, and that's what I did, is I just taped things down horizontally, because I don't think Pangea or Vulcan wants me drilling holes in their thing. Other cool thing about this design is if you're interested in woodworking or whatever, you can get Baltic birch, you can get some type of decent plywood, or even hardwood. It's going to be expensive though. And then you can cut out your own shelves. If you want to, later down the line, get some Baltic birch, cut it out. You can do whatever dimension you want, really, as long as the drilled holes match up. You can stain it. So this could be something you get, and then you can upgrade it with hardwoods. Stain it, paint it. Kind of cool. So what I do to hide things vertically is I took some larger zip ties and I just loosely put them together so that there's plenty of space. And I use that as kind of a guide to start guiding my power and RCA cables up vertically. Once I got that and I started to see how they were laying, then again, I wrapped some more electrical tape, bunched them up together. And at the end, I used electrical tape because these are black. Very similar color to this. Unless you're right up on it, you can't even tell that there's black electrical tape there. You can also use zip ties that are black if you want a more permanent solution. So once I got everything lined up, just wrap around some electrical tape. Sometimes I'd have to do it at the top and bottom. Sometimes I could get away with it just once, but it depends on how many cables you have. It depends on how stiff they are. So once I got them lined up vertically, then I worked on things horizontally. And I always leave myself just a little bit extra, so not only can I move the component around if I want to, there's a little bit of relief in there. And once I got that, I would again line the cables up together. And then on this one, I just took a little bit longer piece of electrical tape. You can use gaffer's tape, you can use black duct tape, whatever it is. But I wanted to have it a little bit longer so I had more surface area, and then I just tightly wrapped it on the side, and I did that a few places. If you don't want to drill some holes, you don't really have to. Just know that depending upon how dirty the rack is, or since this is rough, you know, it's going to be less surface area than this one that is smooth. Anyway, you can use tape to now hide things horizontally. So come out of the component, hide things horizontally on the back, and then go vertical down the line. So if you do this with electrical tape and you get it done, then you can figure out how long the cables need to be. And then you can start buying RCAs that are the perfect length, that are gonna give you enough relief, but aren't gonna be sticking out everywhere. Then you can buy cables, power cords, especially, well, it needs to be an IEC or have a removable power supply in order to buy shorter cables. Most of my stuff is either IEC, or a lot of them have bricks or kind of like the laptop style chargers, and those will probably have like a figure 8 type of cable. You can buy them cheaply, mind you, that are specific lengths, so you don't have a lot of extra cable length to mess around with. And then that's about it. Then I play around with things. So when I find RCAs that I like, they kind of get put into a semi-permanent wiring harness. And especially if I'm going to keep something for a while, like this rack, if I'm keeping it, I'm going to make sure that I have the proper length of power cables, basically get it fixed. And so if I need to change out components, I'm just unplugging them, sliding the component out. The wiring harness stays there. I'll label what each one is and then slide in the new component. For me, that's the cheapest and quickest way of doing cable management. I'm sure there's other ways. But don't feel like you need to go out and buy some fancy schmancy expensive rack that has built-in cable management, because with this and this, a little gumption, you can really clean up your cables and not have to spend $1,000 on a stereo rack. Get something like this. Spend $200, $250 on this and get some Baltic birch or something. If you're really into woodworking, you can like glue together a bunch of different hardwoods. Say if you have a bunch of scrap together, glue them together and then have kind of like a two-tone. The sky's the limit when it comes to customizing your Pangea, Vulcan 4 or 5 shelf rack. I'll link them in the description. So if you want to support the channel, you sign up for Patreon, patreon.com/cheapaudioman. Every Sunday night we have Patreon-only Zooms. We also have Patreon-only Discord group, also Patreon-only Facebook group, and then I also give away a bunch of free stuff to certain Patreon tiers. You can also use the links in the description. I will link the Vulcan stereo racks. Maybe I'll link some electrical tape if you really want to buy it from Amazon. I'll link some Velcro cable ties, some RCAs, XLRs, a whole bunch of stuff. You can also sign up for Amazon Music or Tidal Music. Links in the description. Click on the links, sign up. Even if it's for a trial, I get a couple of bucks. So don't binge watch anything on Netflix or Hulu. Binge listen through your new tidy stereo rack. Fill your soul with happiness. And with that, I'm Randy. I'm the Cheap Audio Man.